A hell of an intro. Anyway, good day to everyone. I'm Dan Lynch. I'm the Vice President of Workshops for CPM and an EVMS consultant for ClearPlan. First, let me thank you all for attending this webinar. We're continuing what we call our Champions series, which was our defined workaround to trying to keep the interest up in CPM as we're all trying to rebound from the coronavirus pandemic, where we couldn't have conferences and meetings and such. Anyway, our topic today is GPT and Artificial Intelligence and its real or potential impacts in the professions of project controls and program management. Our first presenter is David Kasperzak. That's David on my screen to the left. Dave is a project planning and controls consultant working for ClearPlan as well. ClearPlan is a consulting firm specializing in the planning and control needs of companies of all sizes in several sectors with a focus on planning, EVM, and best practices within the defense industry. Outside of his role with the ClearPlan, he has developed an intense personal interest in the present and future impact of ChatGPT and other generative AI tools upon the practice of project management and controls. He is the founder of the LinkedIn group GPT for project management, planning, and controls, and is active on that platform in discussing and sharing the impact of AI. I've been there. I can assure you that the conversations are lively and informative. Vartney Aramali is our newest member of CPM's
extremely popular 100
the role of the Vice President of Research and Standards. She possesses a PhD in Civil, Environmental, and Sustainable Engineering and is currently a full-time assistant professor at California State University in Northridge. She has an impressive page on LinkedIn and has co-authored several articles in the arena of EVM. Any more that those folks would like to say to you, I'll let them say it. And with that completed, one point I'd like to make out after conversations, if you have questions, it is more efficient for you to put your question into the chat, and we'll grab them there. And at the end of the presentations, for the time for Q&A, we will attack those as best we can. Again, my thanks, and on behalf of all of CPM and the leadership team, we hope you find this informative, interesting, and at times, I hope, fun. I'm going to go off screen now, Dave, and the stage is yours, my friend.
Okay, here we go. You should be seeing a PowerPoint presentation right now. Just in case you wandered into the wrong classroom, this is ChatGPT for AI Project Controls, brought to you by the College of Performance Management. My name is David, and we'll go with K. That is going to be the easiest way to pronounce my last name, and is probably better for everybody. A little bit about me. Dan gave me a wonderful introduction. I've been doing this for 25 years. I started my first job in March of 1998 at the DEA, so it is almost 25 years to the day. I've been working project controls ever since, working for many of the large three-letter defense primes, as well as second and third tier component manufacturers, a couple IT PMOs along the way. And as Dan mentioned, the last 4 years, I've been doing that for ClearPlan Consulting. And he's exactly right. I have fallen in love with ChatGPT and what it can do. I have created a LinkedIn group, and if you'd like to join us, there's a little code right there in the bottom right, as well as a URL. You can visit, join the group, contribute to the discussion. A little bit about ChatGPT. We're going to go a little quickly. I want to whet your appetite, build your enthusiasm, get you excited to go and try this tool and contribute to the discussion and the learning community. ChatGPT was developed by OpenAI, the company that founded the technology, funded by Microsoft. If you're wondering about how much investment is in this, $11 billion from Microsoft alone. Elon Musk has also been involved, and you've probably seen stories about Amazon, Amazon Web Services, and a number of other really big tech companies are investing billions in this technology, and they're going to drive it. ChatGPT was launched 3 months ago. 3 months today, actually. Extremely popular. 100 million users David. In 60 days.
Yep. Excuse me. May you refresh your screen and present again? The audience does not see your slides right now.
Oh, really? That's too bad. Let's try that again.
I can see the slides.
How's that? Are we good?
Good.
I can see them too.
Outstanding. Okay. So, as I was saying, it launched in November and gained 100 million users in 60 days, which is the fastest ever consumer application to do so. The previous record was TikTok that took 9 months. This did it in 2/7 of that time, right? GPT stands for Generative Pre-trained Transformer. I'm not a code writer, I'm not a developer, I have no idea what that means other than it was trained to generate text. But exactly what is this thing? If you think of your cell phone, like our friend in the picture here with it, amazed by the technology, take the predictive text in your cell phone or an email and give it 5 years of development, 170 billion inputs, and an input is large. It's a large amount of text. It's a book or an article, right? Take all that capability, put it into the predictive text, and you essentially have a conceptual understanding of what ChatGPT is. It predicts text. More specifically, it is what is called a large language model. Because of the large amounts of language that were used to train it, it uses natural language processing. So to use the tool, you don't have to learn syntax or code. You just use natural language, much like the language I'm talking to you in right now, to tell it what you want and what you want to see or the outcomes you want to derive. It was trained to generate responses based on the patterns of language, right? Some of the sources were Reddit and Wikipedia, which explains some of the weird results that you get when you use the tool. It's only predicting the next text based on your prompt and what it was fed with. The good thing is it's consistently and constantly learning. The more it gets used, the better it understands the patterns of language and the better responses it's able to provide. Important thing to remember is that AI, artificial intelligence, air quotes, it's only artificial. These are not intelligent tools. We're not worried about the Turing test. It is not even smart. It's only responding to whatever you prompt it with, and it generates text based on that prompt. And again, it's looking at statistical probability for the most likely response, which is not necessarily the most correct one. If you think of a way of understanding this, imagine the only inputs it ever had were about chocolate ice cream. You then ask it, tell me the best things about vanilla ice cream. It would then tell you all of the great things about chocolate ice cream, because that's all that it knows and the only reference point that it has. Downsides. There are several legitimate things to be aware of that it can't do all that well, right? The term for this is hallucinations. When you give it a prompt and it returns something ridiculous or silly or just plain wrong, because it's artificial intelligence, people will tend to give it a personality and say that it's hallucinating, it's creating a fantasy world, right? It's not really, it's just generating the next text. When you see articles, as Bartini has commented to me, she sees articles about these crazy things that the AI, generative AI is producing. It's because the prompt left it very open-ended and allowed the response to be something completely creative, and therefore you get a very wrong or very silly answer. Cybersecurity is a big issue. It is web-based. Anything you paste into it sits on a server out there in the world, and it's out there. Anything proprietary sensitive, normal internet rules apply. Don't use it for that. Copyrights are a big problem. Getty Images, for example, there are image generating AI. You'll see a bunch of pictures in this presentation. They were all generated with available web-based tools. The problem is that all that data that it was trained on came from somewhere, and some of it may be copyrighted. Just because it's on the internet doesn't necessarily mean it's free to use, so there are lawsuits. There's also concerns over plagiarism, or if I use the tool to generate this info, who owns that copyright? The legalities about this are evolving almost as fast as the technology itself. There are, of course, bad apples, right? Welcome to the internet. There are people who want to see what they can get away with. Term for this is a jailbreak scenario. The ChatGPT technology is not supposed to create falsehoods. It's not supposed to advise you on how to do bad things. It's not supposed to be malicious. However, people have found ways of using double negatives and such to trick the bot into providing the things it's not supposed to because internet. And as always, people will use it in ways that you really wish they wouldn't. The other big drawback, and especially for us in project controls, one of the things it will have to evolve to is it's generally bad at math. It is improving. I've seen a number of posts where people say, a month ago I asked it to calculate this and got it completely wrong. They ask it now and it gets the right answer. It is improving, but it's, again, a text generator and it's never going to be good at calculations. Given all those downsides, what are all the upsides? It's super fast, right? You can, with very simple prompts, and I'll show you some examples, get enormous amounts of text in return. You can also copy paste in, as long as it's not sensitive, huge amounts of text and get nice summaries, right? You can get those summaries as paragraphs. You can get them in bullet points. You can get them as PowerPoint slides that you can copy paste into those formats. You can specify any number of things, right? You can easily create drafts that you can edit later. Remember, it doesn't always give you the perfect answer, and most folks will say it usually doesn't give you the perfect answer. But it turns hours into minutes and minutes into seconds for generating drafts that you can then edit. And the better you get at prompting, and I'll show you some examples of that, the better response you get that limits the amount of time you need to spend editing. You can also use it to check your grammar when you do write. You can get thought prompts. The biggest users right now are content creators and marketers, people who generate huge amounts of text all the time, all day, every day. You can use it to write emails. You can use it for any number of scripts, ad copy, copywriting, all of those good things, right? The second biggest group of users are code writers. When you use the tool, it's pretty impressive that, again, if you're a code writer and a developer, which I am not, but you can get big chunks of code written for you in seconds. You can also use it to check or optimize your code. And the big thing for me is that we know that this will be integrated into the MS Office suite. When we get there, we have the potential of not having to learn syntax and style sheets and all those things, but simply describe what we want, and the Office applications will return it without having to learn a lot of technical complexity. Okay, so now that we know what this thing is, what it can do, what it can't, how do we actually use it? It's real simple. You go to the website and create an account, and you're ready to go. Once you do that, you enter a prompt. A prompt can be something simple, right? What color is my shirt? Come up with something simple. All right, or tell me about project controls, right? And we'll show you examples of that, of how to increasingly improve your prompts to get better and better results. So prompt engineering is the term for this, right? It's really context providing, if you will. If you ask a simple question, you get a simple response, right? You can look at our rusty robot friend with his dim light bulb. If you ask it a simple question, you get a general response. I asked it, what is project controls? I got a good response. It's accurate. I don't have too many problems with it, but it's basic and somewhat limited. So let's follow up with a little more. Now I want to know, explain the principles of project cost management. Now I get a outline. I get major topics, and I get a description of each one. We're getting better. We're getting better and better results. So now there's a thing called a mega prompt, right? So a mega prompt is providing ChatGPT with extreme detail, somewhat in the form of a script, where you specify all of the things that you want to have in your output. What this is essentially doing, and remember, it is basically a big text predictor, is narrowing the parameters by which it can generate that text, so you get a better response. Still not perfect, but it's showing when you start investigating some of these prompts are enormous, how creative people are getting in a very, very short period of time since this was released. So best practices for a prompt. Give it a role, right? Role play is really effective when using ChatGPT. If you give it a role or a character to simulate, this can be a celebrity, right? It can be a person with a particular speaking style, you know, Matthew McConaughey or Bill Burr or Mario Cuomo or whoever, that you have a style you want it to emulate or a particular role. You're an expert it will return a very different response than if you tell it you are a child or you are a novice or you are a comedian or you are a whatever, right? Then in detail, tell it what you want it to create. This may also include steps, right? First do this, then do that, then do the other thing in the creation of this document I want you to produce. Give it the context and the goal, right? Who are you writing for? What is the audience? If you are writing for a theater audience and you want to develop a script, that's going to be very different than if you are writing for a New York Times article. Okay. And also the goal. I want to amuse, I want to entertain, I want to inform, I want to educate, I want to persuade. It will get different tones based on its understanding of language. And then tell it what the output should be. I want a table, I want an outline, I want verbose text. All of those prompts will help lead you to a better result. So in my example, I gave it the mega prompt for a project management instructor needs to create a course outline for a project controls class. It needs to include these topics. I want a definition of terms. I want a summary overview, course objectives, and a description of the course with the intent of persuading people to attend this class. And make sure I can copy and paste this into Word because I don't want to have to re-edit everything all up later. This is what I get. It took 30 seconds. The speed and accuracy is the most impressive thing to me. Is it perfect? Maybe. This might meet all of your needs. You can copy it, paste it, and run with it. Or all of that initial time spent drafting is out of the way, and now you're just editing it for your own personal tone or style, and maybe some points in the content. Other things you can do with it that I've experimented with that I have found it to be effective for, right? Things pertinent to our world in project management and controls. An EVMS system description, right? What I experimented with is give me a system description. I get a very general system description, right? Within each section, I ask it to drill down, give me even more. How do I update my baseline? What is my baseline control method? Give me a definition of terms. All the little sections you can prompt them one at a time, and you get increasing levels of detail based upon your ability to craft a prompt. Project management plan. Show you an example of a gentleman who is working with ChatGPT and using it to develop pretty elaborate project plans using a series of successive prompts, which is, you know, give it a little info, respond based on the thing you returned, give me a little more. As in my example, if you need to develop instructions or class exercises, it's very, very popular within education, even though it's controversial, and is very effective in generating those kind of documents. On the other side, if you're a student and you're trying to learn something, you can prompt it for exercises and sample questions and to explain its answers. Again, you need to validate everything because it's not necessarily right, but if you want to know more about a subject, you can take that information, go off and do your own research and verify that what this tool is telling me is correct. A variance analysis. Some of you may have seen on my LinkedIn post, I asked it for a variance analysis in the style of Monty Python. I prompted it with some parameters to use, and we got a pretty comical response about, yea, verily, and hey, heartily, we have slipped, but we shall recover. You can also use it to describe a system, a process, application for follow-up and research. This is your own follow-up and research. Again, it's not always right, but if you know nothing about a topic, you can ask it for some information, get an understanding. You can even ask it for keywords that you can go and search later, do more research on, and help stimulate your excitement in your education process. You can draft policy, practice, or procedure documents. It has a pretty in-depth knowledge of most subjects, 170 billion data points, creates a lot of information. So if you need to draft something, prompt it, get a response, it'll get you started, and it's a lot better than staring at a blank page for minutes or hours on end where you have a little writer's block. And on and on and on and on. Right? We can go forever, much like our picture here, the computer surrounded by books. It can go and do many, many things. The other nice thing is, like our lion tamer here with his whip getting the robots in shape, is that you can train it, right? One element of prompt engineering is giving the tool more and more context to work with, right? If you prompt it with learn the tile, stone, sentence structure, grammar of this writing and paste in examples of your own writing or of writing that you want it to emulate, it will learn that and it will return responses in the same style as what you prompted it with. The other nice thing is, let's say 3 weeks ago, you did something, you liked it, and now you need to update it or you want to do it again in a different setting, you can just go back to your history and right from where you left off, you can ask it to continue or to update or to elaborate on this thing that you did many days ago. Of course, it also highlights the danger in it because it's out on the internet and it stays there forever. Okay, let's take a break. So all that is showing how you can generate large amounts of text, which in my role as a consultant, we often have to do for our clients. Once in a while, we may get tagged in our jobs to produce these sorts of things, but it's not day to day where we're mashing data, right? So I wanted to take a step back for a second, share my journey in learning how to use this tool and what I've discovered, and we'll see some more of what I consider day-to-day applications. So we start, as I mentioned, with a general prompt, right? And then we drill down. The nice thing is you don't have to create the first perfect mega prompt. You can ask it a question, get a response, and follow up based on the initial response to continue drilling down and elaborating. So in the beginning, like everyone else, I wanted to see what the tool knew. So give me something generic. Create a system engineering WBS. I got one. I got a pretty good, albeit generic and pretty limited, system engineering WBS. When I posted this online, the immediate criticism was, well, it's not a MIL standard 881D WBS. You're right, it's not. See what it knows. So I tried. I got a horrible WBS. What I realized is I needed to give it some context. So first I asked it about MIL standard 881D, and it gave me a response. Perfectly good, simple initial response describing what that thing is. Then I said, okay, now that we've established the context, I would like a MIL standard 881D work breakdown structure. And I got a much better one, much more aligned with that standard. We're improving. Then I said, okay, so it's good at generic information. What about a specific application? Now, once upon a time, I worked the Enhanced Night Vision Goggle Binocular program. So I asked it with no other prompting other than, tell me about the Enhanced Night Vision Goggle Binocular program, create a MIL standard 81D compliant work breakdown structure for that program. And I got a pretty good one. I then wanted to drill even further. So I pulled out a particular section of the program and say, give me the work breakdown structure pertinent, specific for this section. And again, I got what I think is a pretty good response. Obviously, I'm biased. I really like this technology. So I wanted to make sure that I got good info. Is this really useful to actual real people? So I reached out to people who are currently working on that program and I asked them, what do you think? Response was, this is a good start, which is exactly what I would have expected. It's not perfect. It's not every detail in the program. But what they told me is when they were setting up the program, if they had had this to work from, it would have eliminated a lot of guesswork. And also, as they developed their genuine work breakdown structure in the real world, they could use this as a check to make sure that they covered everything. The downside, as I mentioned before, is calculations where it struggles. And I love this quote from Mr. Collard out here on LinkedIn saying that it's pointless to ask the ChatGPT dude a math question. It's like asking your pocket calculator to write an essay. And he's exactly right. It is simply not designed to do that. And a lot of the criticisms I have seen where people are say, it can't do this, it can't do that, it can't do the other thing, by and large, it's things it was never designed to do. Nonetheless, we can still make use of it. If you are trying to learn Excel, for example, and you have no idea how to write a formula or a complex formula that sorts and filters and does all these things, you can just ask the bot, how do I do this? It will tell you how to write the formula. It'll give you an example of the formula that you can copy and paste, and it will also warn you that you got to make your columns and cells line up in order for this to work. But it's a great tool for learning those little bits of things, especially if you're trying to figure out macros and things. It's a great tool. I'm going to show you some examples of where you can actually use the API. API, not a super technology guy, but API allows one application to talk to another. Using that API, you can bring the ChatGPT technology directly into a spreadsheet and build out templates from there. And of course, if you really want to learn code, as I mentioned, you can ask it for examples and give it in samples of code, and you can take it from there. A little more on that later. So now that we know what this thing is and some examples of how to use it, where do I think this is going to go in the future, right? Because everything I've described is what it can do right now in February 2023. What do I think is going to be possible? It's important to remember that people are already thinking about how to introduce this technology into any number of environments, roles, and industries. ChatGPT is just one example of AI. Right? It's a user-friendly, commercially available, web-based generative AI. There are lots of AI tools, including enterprise-level tools. And the thing is, with these generative tools, is people want to make natural language the norm, right? As I mentioned, I've done this for 25 years. I've gotten pretty good with Excel, but you have to learn the syntax and the formulas. If you are into macros, the same thing. Even if you're trying to be an expert user of Word or PowerPoint, you have to spend quite a bit of time understanding how those tools think. Natural language processing would just simply let you talk, just like I'm talking to you, to get the same result. Because the OpenAI API is available and free to use, you can begin playing with it for free. If you use it a lot, then you have to pay for it, right? So they have their hook. That's okay. They're trying to make money too. But the community of developers that are out there are creating new ways of using this tool on almost a daily basis. And I wouldn't say almost daily, on an hourly basis. There's always something new coming up. It's growing very, very fast. And the level of innovation is pretty impressive, right? So as I mentioned, using the API, you can bring this directly into Google Docs or into Microsoft Excel. Microsoft is a little harder because it's not web-based, although obviously we have Office web-based applications, but it's much easier to integrate with Google Docs, and we'll show you an example of that too. The natural language templates allow you to generate documents in standard repeatable formats using those natural language prompts, as I mentioned. Unfortunately, you still kind of have to know how those tools work. It's not perfect natural language yet, but I think it is really helping us to understand what's going to be possible, as well as probably what's also going to be probable, right? And of course, if you need help doing all of that, there's a place you can go to ask. I want to walk you through my simple example of what I mean by using natural language processing to replicate what otherwise requires technical knowledge. So I experimented with the API in Google Sheets, and as I mentioned, you can do it in Excel, but it's a lot harder. But if you're interested, click that little code down there and you can learn. The data in the range of cells next to the prompt, or below the prompt, excuse me, is something most of us will probably recognize, right? It's a simple example of weekly labor charging. You have the week ending date, you have the task, you have the person who charged, right? And you might recognize that these are all Simpsons characters in my simple example. Maybe they're building a monorail, and if you get that reference, you're in my same age range. Anyway, so for the prompt, I provided a list of the unique combination of items in the data. I'm not really concerned with when they charge. Again, I know it's bad at math, but it's good with text. And I want to know who's charging what, and I want you to sort that alphabetically. I get an accurate result. Now, if I were to do this in Excel, I'd have to create a formula, right? I would need to know about the unique function. I would need to know about the sort function. I would need to know how to select the data. I would need to know how to write the syntax for those formulas in order to get them to do what they want. But if I have natural language processing, I can replicate that capability without having to learn all of the syntax or code or style sheets or any of those other things. I simply describe what I want, and the tool returns it to me. That's where I think this is going, and where I think AI and generative AI will become really powerful. Gentleman on LinkedIn who is wonderful to follow. I encourage everybody to follow him, Michael Kaplan. As I mentioned at the beginning, he is using the technology to create templates that generate a lot of his project documents. He is an IT project manager. He does a lot of COT software implementations. This works for him because a lot of his work is repetitive, right? So within the tool, he creates a prompt. The prompt then, using that API, goes out to it, not ChatGPT. Be careful there. It is the technology behind ChatGPT, but it's still OpenAI's API. It goes out, it generates that text right in your document, because he's using it to create project objectives, backgrounds, risk registers, and more and more and more. Really impressive what he's doing, and every day his knowledge grows and he's able to do more with it. He's a great follow. He's also learning how to create project schedules. And here's a simple example here. You can see the prompt. He gave some project information, one line at a time in his mega prompt. The bot and understands it. It returns all that data in a single cell. So as I mentioned, you have to know some spreadsheet functions, but he learned them and he's able to parse all that text into individual cells and columns. And now he has something that he can pivot, sort, filter, and calculate off of right within the spreadsheet. And he doesn't have to go out to the web and copy and paste it back. He's doing it right from within the application. Microsoft is already introducing this technology. That, to me, as I mentioned, is where I think this becomes phenomenal. I think that this is going to be integrated within the MS Office suite. Already, we know that there's a ChatGPT technology within the Bing search engine. A lot of the headlines you're seeing right now are about those hallucinations where the prompts are not exactly great and the bot is going wild. If you haven't seen it, go find it. Some of them are really funny. It is causing Microsoft to have to take a step back with how quickly they're rolling this out. And you may have seen that when Alphabet, Google's parent, rolled out their competitor called Bard, they asked it a question about the first images of interplanetary or extrasolar system planets. And it got the answer completely wrong. And Alphabet stock dropped $100 billion in value in 24 hours. Well, nonetheless, a lot of that has to do with not prompting the tool correctly. There's a premium version of Teams available. During your Teams meeting, it will record your session, it will take notes and the messages and the chats and all the things going on, and it will return to you a list of action items and a summary of meeting minutes. I don't have a premium account, but what I have seen is that it's not just giving it to you like, here's the right answer. It's saying, I think these are your meeting minutes. I think these are action items. Do you accept? And you can create things that way without having to sit and type and figure out what your minutes and actions are. It's automated and created using the ChatGPT technology. How do we know that it's going to be in Outlook, Word, and PowerPoint? Because they're telling us. This article on Verge.com was based on a conversation with an executive at Microsoft, and they're telling us that they plan to roll this out possibly as early as next month, but certainly within 2023. So all of the apps that are primarily text generators are going to be receiving this technology in some form very soon. And my personal favorite is Excel will be right behind. Again, it's more syntax and it's more complex and you get different formats and whatnot. But I do think we're going to get to a point where we simply describe what we want to see and it happens without having to learn all the complexities of code and syntax. So let's take a step back and address some of the criticisms. A number of them are valid, right? You can't get away from them. There are limitations and there are concerns, but I think we can address a few of them. First thing you often hear is some variation in the term people are indispensable. Well, yeah, of course, right? This isn't intelligent AI, right? People are going to be indispensable. The human in the loop is going to be needed. The bot doesn't understand context. The bot doesn't understand empathy. It doesn't emote, right? Those interpersonal bits of communication are the things we can do that the bots can't. But we have to remember things are going to change, right? The immense popularity of this technology, its rapid growth, and the fact that this isn't something that someone just developed. It's been in development for 5 to 10 years. It's just become popular. So the way in which we teach and work and learn and the level of innovation, and like any other major technological innovation, we have to figure out how to do that in the best way possible. My personal opinion, I think over time, this technology will evolve, become more sophisticated. It will be able to handle administrative and a lot of analytic tasks, meaning the computation part of analysis, much more quickly and with much more accuracy and with greater reliability. So where does that leave us? That leaves us not in the position of compiling data, but in the position of acting on data, influencing, negotiating, communicating, collaborating, a lot of other aidings are all going to become much more prominent in many more professions, in my opinion. Another big criticism is, I'm tired of hearing about this. Dan mentioned at the beginning that LinkedIn is a buzz with all this, and every news article you see is about ChatGPT and AI and whatnot. Of course, we're in the hype cycle, right? Gartner has this diagram they update from time to time about where things are in the hype cycle. And there's always an initial surge. People get super excited, but then they get disappointed when they learn what it can actually do, and it's not as great as the initial wow factor, right? But things level out. Okay, now that we understand its limitations, how can we make use of this? And so it plateaus into something useful. You'll notice that the hype cycle has a very similar curve to the picture on the other side of the screen that depicts the Dunning-Kruger effect. If you're not familiar with Dunning-Kruger, in layman's terms, it basically says the less you know about something, the more an expert you think you are. So in the beginning, wow, look what ChatGPT can do. Oh, but wait, it's just predicting text. Well, it's predicting wrong text, but if I learn to use it correctly, there's still value in this thing. So you're going to see hype because like anything that's new and exciting, there's hype. And it's also driven by social media and news cycles and everything else. What about, we already know what we're doing. Why do I need this new tool? My concept for this is something called the point of relevancy, right? In every use case, there's a point at which the bot is not going to return anything you can use. You have more expertise and deeper understanding of the subject than what the bot does, and it can't provide you with anything useful, right? So I drew this little picture to help illustrate it. What I do think is going to happen as the technology improves is that line moves to the right. But again, it is use case specific. The same person who is an expert in critical path analysis isn't going to get anything out of this bot, but that same person might want to know the script of the next Jennifer Lawrence movie, right? Some aspect of what this tool can do will be relevant to you, but there's always a point of relevancy where it just doesn't matter. And especially when we're talking about calculations and the things that it's not good at, you're past the point of relevancy. It's not going to help you. But for lots of other tasks, or even for your learning to get to that point of expertise, I think it adds a lot of value. You can mitigate some of those issues with better prompt engineering, but you're never going to get there, and it never quite goes to zero. Cheating. Yeah. People are going to cheat. Not going to stop it, right? When movable type first became possible and books were introduced, oh, people are going to cheat because they're reading it from the book. People are going to cheat because they're using their calculators. People are going to cheat because of the internet. It will happen, right? We have to, like anything else, we have to learn how to use it. Serious concerns in education and copywriting, as I mentioned earlier, plagiarism, are students really learning? Are teachers really teaching, right? If we're just generating this text without analyzing it, using it, correcting it, and ensuring its ethical use, we have a problem, right? Ethics are everything in this walk of life, like anywhere else. The tool is going to grow and evolve and continue in popularity. Making sure that it is used correctly, like any other tool, is the important part. And the most important thing to remember is that despite the sinister look of our friend on the slide here, the bot isn't evil, right? It is a tool that we need to monitor and regulate and instruct people on in order to make sure that it's used ethically, much like any other major technology since the beginning of time. Cybersecurity risks. I don't think we need to talk about this one too much. The normal rules of privacy and security apply, same as we've ever done in the internet age. If it's sensitive, personal, or proprietary, don't use the bot. It doesn't belong there, it retains everything. And keep in mind, it's using what it learned to generate new text. It's entirely conceivable you could put something out there that doesn't belong. Some anonymous user somewhere in the future writes a prompt and it pulls your data. And maybe not your personal data, but maybe your company's data. And especially a lot of us are in the defense sector. There's a lot of big no-nos in what we do, and we already know that. Right? So hopefully you're excited. Hopefully you've learned a little bit about this tool. Hopefully you will join our group and contribute to the discussion. And I just want to give a few parting thoughts. First of them is, okay, you've told me a little bit about all this, but where's it going, right? In the near term, and remember, we're going to roll this out in MS Office this year, so let's say over the next year, maybe 2, 3, it's mostly about generating text in the form of documents and code. That's going to be the primary use for quite a while, right? Over the long haul, this is making us aware of what's possible. ChatGPT is only one AI tool. There are many, many others that are more specifically tuned to analytics and calculations and any number of other things. Some of what I've seen that I find really interesting is they're not going to try and make ChatGPT good at calculations. What they're going to make it good at is recognizing the language patterns where somebody needs calculations. It will then call out to other applications through some API and leverage that application's better capabilities, its more specific function, and then bring those results back into the text generator. I think that's pretty fascinating, and I really wish I knew some engineers were doing this because they might be able to explain it to me. I also think it's telling us what's probable, right? I don't see that this is slowing down. I don't think that it's a fad and will go away. I think we're at the very, very beginning of understanding a new way of working and learning and doing. What's really interesting to me is all I've really talked about here is based on my understanding and experience with user level applications. There are enterprise applications in development where conceivably, where right now it's all based on information that's out there on the internet, you could bring this inside of the firewall. And Microsoft has said they'll plan on licensing this technology, bring it inside the firewall, and everything on your SharePoint servers, on your shared drives, in your network folders, in your emails, and on your Exchange server, it's going to be fed with that information. And that way, when you prompt it for something, you're not just pulling from generally available information out there on the interwebs. You're going to pull from your own corporate body of knowledge and get even more specific and more fine-tuned responses to generate, even if it's just the first draft of things like we're seeing already, save a lot of time and generate things that are more and more specific to your particular use case. I also think analytics will be increasingly performed by AI tools. At machine speed, they're going to be able to do more than most humans can, right? This allows for more real-time processing, quicker processing, and also as it learns the types of analyses that we want to do, or we better engineer tools that can create those things, they're going to be increasingly performed by the bots. Now, does this mean that AI is going to replace us? Well, no. Flat out no. I don't even think that's a conversation worth having. It's not going to replace us. The bots aren't taking over despite the appearance of our high-powered, sinister-looking friend here, right? It excels at certain things. I'm sorry? I heard somebody.
I think you're good, Dave. Go ahead.
Okay, fair enough. Okay, so we are not going to be replaced, right? The AI tools excel at compiling information, doing calculations, and are increasingly getting better at generating outputs, right? They're going to get more sophisticated over time, and they're going to use more natural language processing, both in the inputs and in the outputs. Right? We're going to be able to tell it what to do just using conversational language and get returns that we don't have to try and figure out. they're also going to come back to us using that same natural language. The organizations who adapt to this sooner will have an advantage. I think it's going to be a strategic advantage in how well organizations use AI. There's already a lot of conversations and businesses being started about developing an AI strategy. And this has to do with, using the bot well, using it effectively, using it ethically to get the right response, because people are seeing that there's a competitive advantage to be had. As I mentioned, there's lots of other tools besides just ChatGPT. You can go out on the web and try all of them. Again, they're mostly designed for individual use. There are some enterprise applications, but again, probably the price tag is beyond most of our means. Nonetheless, there's lots of things you can try. I love the image generators. As I mentioned, everything in here has been generated with either Stable Diffusion or Midjourney. Simple text prompts. Give me an ominous looking robot thing. It will return that. You get great images from there. And of course, as I've said several times, enterprise use applications are coming, which I think will really cause this to change a lot of work cultures and methods and things that we do. So given that all this is coming, what can you do about it? Try it, engage, become part of the community, give it a whirl, see what it can do, see what it can't do, right? Contribute. Users are discovering lots of ways to use these tools, some of which I've showed you. But I think, if you look at our picture here, we have this technological marvel cyborg writing with a pen on paper. Why would you do that, right? We don't just want to find new ways of doing old things. We want to find new ways of doing new things. And so maybe we have to think about ways that these emerging technologies change some of the things we do. I'm not sure I know what that is yet, but I'm really open to figuring it out, right? And of course, follow me, connect with the group on LinkedIn, join the discussion, and share your experiences. That's it for me. I would really like to thank Dan Lynch for inviting me here. This is an awesome conversation. He's also a fun guy. We go back and forth on this all the time. It is a good, healthy argument. I enjoy every bit of it. ClearPlane and the management team, my boss Lena is on the call. Josh and Jeremy, also part of the management team, have been very supportive of this, even though it is not part of ClearPlane's offerings currently. They're a great group of people to work with and for. Check them out. And I am also here in Lowell Makes at their media studio. If you're unfamiliar with makerspaces, these are nonprofit organizations that give you access to things like media studios, wood shops, machine shops, CNC routers, sewing studios, ceramic studios, but they are fantastic spaces. I definitely encourage you to find one in your local area. If you happen to be in Lowell, Massachusetts, come and check them out. That's it for me. I'm going to close out of this presentation. Vartini is going to take over and share her thoughts and ask you to conduct a brief survey, and then we'll come back to me for some Q&A.
Yeah, and if I could just hop in real quick before Vartini starts, there's a lot of, I'll say, banter that's in the chat, which I think is pretty awesome. However, like one or two questions per se for Dave. So if you have your questions, I think it's best you drop them into the chat because they may hit your brain, and then you'll forget about them at the end of all of this, and you'll forget to ask. So I think it's a good idea to use that. Yeah, Dave, you probably aren't watching. There's some really awesome conversation going on in the chat box. But anyway,
yeah, I'm catching up now.
Let's turn this over to Vartini, who's got some fascinating stuff in terms of a survey. So please, the stage is yours, Vartini, and thank you so much for being here.
Yes, thank you for the great presentation. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Can you see my slide?
Indeed.
Yep.
All right, great. So for those who just joined, my name is Vartini Aramali. I'm an assistant professor at California State University in the Northridge in the Department of Civil Engineering and Construction Management, as well as the VP of Research at CPM. In this new role, I have teamed up with my teammates, Dr. Namho Cho and Daryl. Dr. Namho Cho is a design project manager at the University of Iowa, and also Daryl is a senior programmer, planner, and also the VP of digital presence at the CPM here. And together we're trying to explore the use of ChatGPT in IPM, and I'll define what it is later on in my next slides. I'll be quick, I promise. So first of all, I'm going to do just a quick intro and then definitions of two terms specifically and the objectives of my research and this team. And also we'll have to request some of your feedback in my survey, which is represents the methodology of this research. So as I was doing some literature review, there is not a lot that has been done out there. I can tell you, this is quite new and so forth. So I found this figure really interesting. It was published this last month, probably. It's by the authors of Gonzalo and Gorido. I'll just kind of use my pen here just to highlight on the fact that today we just focused on ChatGPT, which is basically a text-to-text kind of a tool in AI. So this figure is the result when they were trying to classify all the different AI tools according to their data inputs and outputs. So today we saw that in ChatGPT, the input is a text that we're writing as a script, and then the output is another text given back to us. But for example, David was mentioning about one example here, del-E is a text to image. So in that case, we're going to write the text and the tool is going to give us a complete brand new image that we can use and so forth. So these authors, they classified all these AI tools in a state-of-the-art type of a paper into 9 categories, as you can see here: text to image, text to 3D, text, image to text to text, and so forth. I found this fascinating. Now, trying to implement ChatGPT today on IPM and EVMS, if we can do so. So first of all, let me give you a definition of IPM. IPM was defined in one of my past research by the authors Dr. Gibson and et al. 2022. So we defined it together as the collection of processes to ensure various project elements are well coordinated, and it also establishes and manages the involvement of stakeholders and resources to make sure everything is working properly. And another definition I wanted to put here again is the definition of EVMS. For those who are not into project management field, EVMS is the management system that integrates the work scope, schedules, and budgets for effective planning, performance, and management control. Now, the reason why I'm putting this definition as well, just to highlight on the fact that there were 250 professionals just like you giving us feedback on only the definition of EVMS. So this is the result of getting all the feedback from these professionals and putting it out there in the literature in terms of a really good definition. So the reason why, again, I'm putting this here is because today we need as researchers your input on a lot of the topics that we discussed today. So the objective will be mainly to just identify capabilities, limitations, and implications of this tool as applied in the domain of project management, project controls, IPM, EVMS, and so forth. So at least I'm trying to address the question where we say, how can AI tools support project controls practices in an innovative way? By the way, Daryl and Dr. Namho, please jump in if you want to add anything meanwhile. So together we created a survey, and I'm going to post a link of the survey and the QR code here, and we'll provide a couple of minutes if you can just at least open the survey. I'll just be silent for a minute here.
The link for the survey is also in the chat, folks. Thanks for doing that, Daryl.
No problem.
Just for information, this survey can be filled out later on. Again, just wherever you reach, you can fill it out later. So you can take your time to fill it out. And also, please feel free to share these links with other professionals involved in project management, as well as experienced in using EVMS and so forth. And some of you, I saw that you put in the chat your opinion, your feedback. So please feel completely honest to put your feedback or your answers. The answers will all be confidential and will not be. We will not share any of your names and so forth for the answers. All I'm gonna do is just I'm gonna get the feedback and we'll try to analyze it thoroughly and have my findings, and also we'll be sharing these findings with you at a later webinar. Another thing just to highlight here, you can start with the survey at any time and you can continue at any time, but if you want your response to be fully recorded, please make sure that you reach at the last page of the survey where it says, are you ready to exit? Once you hit this yes, the responses will be finalized and recorded, so you cannot go back and edit. But before going into this step, you can always edit your responses as you reflect on the presentation today, as well as our objectives. So having said that, another thing I'm going to put here, the references I use for this presentation. And also, I would like to proceed to thank my teammates, Dr. Namho Cho was also, I think, is in the meeting, as well as Daryl, who provided a great excitement and motivation, who brought up the topic of ChatGPT, and we were trying to make use out of it and so forth. And I know he tried a lot of things with ChatGPT using as applied in EVMS and trying his trials and experiments. I would like to thank, of course, Dan to provide us the opportunity with this topic and do it with the CPM, as well as David for the great presentation. And I kind of communicated with him in the past, and I tried to improve the survey based on how he was going to present today. So that's a lot of credit for you as well. Finally, just thanking everyone in the board of directors at the College of Performance Management. If you have any comments or feedback, please feel free to reach out, or you want to continue discussion on any of these things. I put my email addresses there. And with this, I think I'm gonna have to stop here, and we're gonna open, I think, Q&A for David and so forth. So I'm just gonna stop sharing my screen.
Well, thank you so much, Martin. I'm going to take the survey later afterwards, of course, and I will provide that to you. And certainly don't want to put you on the spot, but it might be fascinating for you to return at some time in the future to share the results of the survey. I can't think of anybody online here that wouldn't want to get insight into some of the responses that you had. So let's keep that on the back burner. Now, what I'd like to do, there is not a whole lot of questions, by the way. I'll go through them, obviously, but what I really want to do is open up the floor while I'm looking through the chat to find the questions. Daryl put them all together in the chat. Let's see if I can go do that without screwing the works up here on my end. Folks, I want you to feel free to ask any one of our presenters. Let's see, here we go. Oh, this is an easy one because I asked it. This is for Dave.
Yeah.
You had a bullet on one of the slides. It doesn't matter, but I quote that it can easily set the style and tone.
Mm-hmm.
That was a bullet that you had in there.
Right.
I don't want to be taken out of context, so stop me if like, you know, like Dan, you're way off base, get lost. But
Right.
I was curious if you could expand on the word tone, because to me,
So,
when I hear tone, it's the inflection of my voice if I talk like
right.
this, or if I talk like this.
Sure. I think the best way to understand it is adjectives, right? Give me a silly presentation on project controls. Give me an informative education on project controls. And the subtleties of that type of prompt can help to set the tone. Yet, if you think of it this way, if I were to ask it to give me a response in the style of a particular comedian, I would get a very different tone if I asked it for something from Bill Burr than if I asked it for something from Dave Chappelle. Even though they're both great comedians, they have.
I don't know. They're both pretty close right there.
Dick Cavett versus Robin
there
Williams.
You go. There you go. George Burns and George Carlin. Now there's a swing, right?
Right, exactly.
Okay, thank you for that. Next question. Has any, and this is for the general audience, I believe, has anyone tried to train the AI with project EVM metrics to predict performance? Anybody out there played with that yet to get a TCPI or as such, or a new EAC?
Anyone other than me?
Hi, Dan, David. I have been. I've actually created some scenarios, about 8 scenarios about EVM, and it has calculated SPI, CPI, and TCPI. I do want to dig down to like the Pasky model, the PERT, and so forth. So it's growing. It's learning.
Thank you for that, Daryl.
Can I
Yeah, I
ask a
know.
question of that?
Sure.
Daryl, what was the accuracy like when you did that?
92% accurate. The 8% was me asking the question in a different approach.
Okay. Oh, cool. Well, that's interesting.
Yeah, I know in some of my own experiments, it gets the answer right, and then you just like refresh, ask again, it gets the answer wrong. Usually not wildly wrong, but wrong enough. That's what, verify, validate everything that the bot does. And again, really curious to see how this technology changes over time and we improve upon those sort of calculations. But math in general is where it struggles.
Okay.
Yeah,
cool.
and I want to add that if you write a question, the more you're clear in the question, I think David mentioned that the more you're putting some of the details, the better the responses will be.
So we have a fresh question from my friend Carlo. Explain project controls to a 5th grader. I don't know. That doesn't sound like a question, Carlo. Would you like to expand on that?
No, it's not a question. It was just a comment as to what David was saying about the different tones. You can tell it to describe project controls to a 5th
Good
grader,
example.
and it'll simplify it to a 5th grader level.
So a 5th grader is like people like you and I that are EVM experts, because that's about as far as we needed to go. Got it. I got you, pal. Let me see. We scroll back up. I think you've already answered this, Dave, but I'm going to read it.
Sure.
Can you do? Is it possible to do an iterative set of prompts, such as you keep the base output, but you keep refining the prompt for an updated output? I'm assuming you've already experienced that.
Yes, absolutely. And what's also nice is you can ask it to continue as well. If you prompt it for something and it gives you, say, 3 paragraphs and you want 3 more, you can just say continue and it will give you even more. You can, that's actually a prompting technique, right? You ask it for some information, and all of my examples where I was learning how to do this were follow-up prompts within the same thread.
Cool.
And one of the things also is you may create so many iterations of that same prompt that it gets very convoluted and you start getting those hallucinogenic, crazy answers. Start a new session from where you left off, and it kind of gives you a better feedback than if you are trying to build upon a bad foundation.
So guys, I want to play devil's advocate in this profession, and especially in this environment. This takes away the thinking of it all, especially me being a millennial / Gen Z, I guess, if you put it that way. It takes away the thinking, and it just that concerns me. So I wanted to ask the audience out there if I'm just being that Debbie Downer to ChatGPT.
I refuse to respond on the grounds that it'll incriminate me as an old guy.
Yeah.
Well, I have my opinion on some of them. What I'm looking at and hearing what it does. Seems to me a lot of the stuff that it's doing is the mundane stuff we do that doesn't take that much thinking. And the things that frustrate me the most, I have to spend so much time just gathering and dealing with, this large amounts of data. I'm like, that didn't take much thinking. It was just annoying. I would much rather be in there being the analyst and coming to, solving problems and coming up with solutions based on what my data is telling me, if that makes sense. That's how I view this. That's why this excites me.
Makes perfect sense, Wendy. In fact, it reminds me a lot of when the DCMA first came out with their idea of doing some surveillance in a automated way with their Decum tool. I don't know if you all remember those days if you're an EVM weenie. And the question I kept asking myself month after month after month that I couldn't get an answer to, and it's like, okay, fine, I get all this, but you have yet to tell me, how do I feed this beast? And it reminds me a lot of the prompt stuff that you're talking about, Dave, is that's the stuff I have to feed the beast. And
Right.
I think that's where folks in project controls can have an expertise in, because somewhere along the line, as I've said to you many times, you've got this human intervention. Somebody has to come along and push the button. You know what I mean? And as far as the Decum tool for surveillance, somebody has to create a certain type of file that'll feed the beast for the DCMA. So I'm also thinking, and in this world, it's prompts. Somebody has to be really good, almost develop an expertise at being able to do the prompts so that the beast gets enough food to really give you a solid output back.
Right. And
One man's opinion.
Prompt engineering and prompt engineer are actual jobs and skill sets.
No.
Just in
Wow,
90
there you
days.
go.
Yeah.
There you go.
No.
Yeah. And,
So there
and
is
your,
a
your
future for
comments
me.
on,
Oh, God, it's
all
encouraging.
that administrivia, all the things that lead up to the education, the training, the practice, the documentation, whatnot, that lead up to the point where you can conduct your analyses.
Yes.
We're seeing right in front of us that processing time is going from days to hours, hours to minutes, and minutes to seconds.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yes. But also, I've in one of my scenarios, I asked it to type an EVM lesson plan as if I'm John Driesnack. And believe it or not, it actually created one in John Driesnack's words because it picked specific.
Was there anything in there about
articles.
earned schedule or TPMs?
Yes.
I'm just
Yes.
curious.
Some of earned schedule, Dan, but it does grab it as far as the content.
Yeah. So a few things actually. Remember, you said, this takes the thinking away from us. I absolutely disagree, right? Here's my simple question. When it returns something that's wrong, how do you know?
You fact check it.
Because you're already an expert.
Yes.
Right? So the
I
use
happen to
cases,
agree with you, Dave.
Yeah.
Very,
the use
very
cases,
vehemently.
in my opinion, the use cases we're going to see are going to be curvilinear. You're going to have on one end novices. I know nothing about this subject. I want to learn something about it. I want to know keywords. I want to get a general introduction. On the other end are going to be experts. Like we mentioned, I know what wrong looks like, but I can get all that administrivia out of the way. And even if it gives me something wrong, I can just edit that out because I already know what I'm looking for and I don't have to spend hours creating all that upfront content. And the other thing, and I love to do just for fun, where you mentioned, the follow-up prompt thing. So in the style of this expert, give me some document, and just for fun, okay, give me that same document in the voice of Daffy Duck. And you'll get something comical that keeps you going when you're just burning out.
That in and of itself is worth the tool. I'm telling you right now.
There you go. And then the third thing, of course, is, again, remember, currently ChatGPT is only trained through, I believe it was April of 2021. If you ask it about anything recent, like, for example, one of the tasks I have a clear plan is to try and make sense of the IPM DAR. So, hey, ChatGPT, tell me about it. I got things from 2 versions ago.
David?
Hey, David.
To
It's
add
been
to that,
updated.
yeah, it's been
I'm
updated.
sorry.
No,
Yeah.
it's okay.
Yes,
February
Go
13th.
for it.
Let's be very careful about how we talk about the IPM DAR. It's sort of near and dear to your friend Dan. Moving right along.
But as far as ChatGPT, David, you are right. A month ago, but right now there's a feature that you can add to ChatGPT in your premium account to capture after 2021.
Fair enough.
I have a free account, and my version says February 13th of this year.
Oh, really? See?
Yeah.
Yep.
I think it's ChatGPT 4 is coming out. I believe so.
Yeah, that's So GPT-4 is not 170 billion inputs; it's 1 to 2 trillion. So 1,000 times as many tokens.
Yes.
So I don't know if you people are looking in the chat box or anything, but I want to repeat a comment that was made by Joe, and I feel very strongly about it, and it's a really good comment. He simply writes, "Nobody wants to start with a blank page," and that is so true. I used to, work a lot in this industry about, I don't care if you hand me a piece of garbage. It's easier to throw darts at a piece of garbage and get it right than you're staring at a blank piece of paper, wondering if they ate the
5 to 10 years. It's just
front of the conference room. So my compliments to you on that, Joe. I could not agree with you more, and thank you for that.
exactly
You're
right.
welcome.
Yeah.
Any more questions? Any more? Doesn't have to be questions or conversations. We do have until 3:30. However, we can also give you your time back. I wouldn't be opposed to that because it's approaching happy hour here in Florida. Oh, it's happy hour wherever I am, right?
So Dan, I noticed somebody in the chat had said something that they were curious about Deltek and Cobra and an AI sort of tool that they're developing. Do you know anything about that?
Me personally, I do
Anybody?
not.
I know I've come across that all of the major ERPs have some element of AI already in them.
Okay.
And yeah, I would assume we are only going to see that become more sophisticated and grow over time.
Okay, yeah, that I thought it was interesting to see that with the Cobra and the AI.
Yeah, I mean, Deltek has it as part of Cost Point, so you imagine, it will start
Okay.
there and roll out to the applications that have the largest user base. Right?
So CPM does not endorse or support any vendors for tools, but yes, we can share what's happening. Okay, so I don't feel that we've violated anything there, right, Rebecca? Well, you keep me on the straight and narrow there, dude.
So far, you're good. So far,
Oh,
you're
God
good.
God
Although
bless you.
I have to say, I'm waiting for the first lawsuits to be filed in regard to this.
Yeah, I think they
Just
already are.
because then we're good. Well, no, because I think that AI has the possibility of truly infringing on copyright, and I'm not so sure that we're not going to start seeing that. And once that starts, then our legislative bodies are going to start mucking around. And I say this as an attorney, and that's going to cause all sorts of risks in using the tools. So I think we need to be careful. I mean, Facebook has already set for hours with Congress answering questions in regard to their very simple AI tools. So I think we need to keep that in the back of our mind. So you can't take the human out because that's the only way to make sure you're not going to step into the copyright infringement area, or you're not going to be posting sensitive data that you aren't aware is sensitive. So we need to constantly keep our vigil up, because I've gone out, I've talked to friends, and sometimes when they tell me what they've been using it for, I start to get heart palpitations as an attorney. So I think we need to remain vigilant. And as you said, all of the companies are developing their own versions of AI to some extent or another. I would not be surprised to see companies putting up some firewalls and actually experimenting further with AI, just because it's a wonderful way to initiate some internal analytics and gathering data and doing some, at least for now, some very simple analysis that can be turned over to humans to do more in depth. So the future is expansive here.
And to add to that, to everybody, I went down that rabbit hole as far as legal terms, and this is for me representing myself, not a CPM. I asked it questions like, give me the actual questions from the PMP, or give me the actual questions from the PEP series from CPM. It did not give me that. So it does have some sort of I guess, police to trying to cheat in regards to what Dave was talking about earlier.
Well, your key word was actual. If you
Yes.
I asked it once for past questions and it coughed up 3 or 4. So the actual is what it was keen on. So that's its natural language word key to put up that roadblock.
Yes.
So, thanks, Rebecca. I really found your chat there, about attorneys and the impact there really fascinating. So, is there anything else that we want to chat about? I'm not really anxious to shut it down, but I don't want to prolong the ending. I certainly want to thank everyone for attending.
Dan,
obviously,
can I just touch on one thing?
No, we're done. I'm sorry. You be quiet.
Dan, shush. We mentioned cybersecurity, and for many of us, that is a big issue, not just because we work with government clients, but we work with the private sector, who's also sometimes even more worried about cybersecurity. So I was wondering if there's been any discussions on being able to take these tools and put up better firewalls or making sure that it can't track IP addresses and things like that, because one of the things that Facebook has sort of had their hands slapped on is being able to track per the user and accumulating huge reservoirs of private data. So I'm just wondering what the future of that looks like or what steps they're taking.
And that is why you're here. That's an outstanding point. It really is.
Yeah.
It's an outstanding point. I don't think anybody.
I'm glad I have a reason for being.
But I think when you just want to use it, you're gonna have to create an account and put some information or use some of your email addresses and so forth. So I think that's yeah.
Yeah, that to me they're already tracking a bunch of information, and I can sort of tell when I ask it the same question, it will sometimes default to a train that it's already provided me. So I just think we need to have our guard up for now until we get to that future state where we have the guardrails on the tool itself.
Right. Well, your point there, and I was thinking of the same thing, is this will be creating jobs for people that actually do create firewall type of technology to deal with it. In other words, this sort of technology will be creating additional jobs in the future that deal with this new ability to access, I would think, behind, within companies and governments.
Yeah, and it's not just firewalls, but a whole crowd of people who will be constantly learning on how to penetrate them. But
well, yeah, it'll be a whole thing to have to deal with the hackers and everything else. So it seems like there'll be a whole burgeoning field there.
Yeah, build a better mousetrap and build a better mouse. Right.
There you go.
Yep.
Oh, that's good stuff right there. Anything else we want to bring up or dwell upon, or?
Daryl, were you the one who was trying to say, forget everything before my conversation, and so that the ChatGPT will start to create like text from scratch? Were you the one who tried that, right?
Yes. So I got bored with ChatGPT with the normal questions, and I've been using it as a talk back to me type of bot. So I gave it a paragraph with specific tasks to give me an answer when I want it. So the normal question of, hey, give me the definition of EVM, it's more into a scenario of, hey, ChatGPT, you have been an EVM expert for 20 years. You will not answer this question until I ask you a question on EVM, and only provide me specific information to EVM. And the reply was yes. Understood. And that's when it started asking me different types of questions from there.
The problem is that as we're asking a question, it's just being trained to us individually and then continuing to remember what we asked from before and just coming up with the same similar repetitive ideas at some point. That's something I realized. I don't know if there is a way to say, please forget everything we chatted before and let's start over from new data and so forth.
forget
Yeah.
everything we've done before, and provide the most, chaotic answer even.
Yes.
Yeah, based on the prompt.
So David, is this the kind of things that that role of prompt engineer does and all of that, that they really get very specific on these things? How to ask, how to prompt it, histories of that, would that be part of that role?
I think so.
Okay,
Yeah.
no, I
Yeah.
think it's interesting that would
Yeah.
grow that way.
Yeah. No, so I think prompt engineering, again, there's a lot of hype cycle to all this. I prefer to think of it as context feeding.
Okay.
Right? You're feeding the bot context. And I think, there are certain people who, this is 90 days, it's been available to the public. Certain people are just attuned to it, they're better at it, or maybe they have some previous experience with it because it is about a 5-year-old technology. So they're putting out there and they're creating their web pages and little ebooks you can buy and all those sorts of things, where they're just really, really good at it. But it's really hard to find, the Excel course anymore. People kind of pick it up and have learned it. I think we're going to get that with these prompt engineering as well, that it will become a common thing. Like, you learning how to send a text, right? You don't have courses on that either. I think it's going to become more common and people will adapt to it and it won't be quite a profession. Currently, if you are in marketing or in content creation, it's a pretty useful skill. And sure, if you're in that world, I'd put it on my resume.
Right. Well, because we actually already do that often in our roles. We're doing prompting. We know
Yeah.
we are. That's what we do, and we try to get the answers that we need.
Right. Yeah.
In terms of literature, there are some pieces of information applied in healthcare, in finance. I just want to remind you, this is completely new, and especially I wonder if we're really thinking ethically. I wonder if it's going to replace medical doctors at the end. I'm just going to chat, hey, I have this issue, and what do you think? So it's kind of a big deal. Or otherwise, in another area, it's the academic world. I mean, I'm just trying to imagine how impactful such tools can be if we use them in a certain wrong patterns or in the wrong way and so forth. So yeah.
The brave new world. It's and it's way past 1984. God, Orwell would turn over in his grave.
Someone is saying it's a great therapist. I bet it is.
Or
Well,
with Daryl, it's like a nice buddy to have. No.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It'd be like your
That's
little
true.
buddy to ask questions too.
But it actually learned.
I didn't say that, Daryl. It was Wendy.
Oh,
That was
no
Wendy
worries.
Hilton, Hilton.
I'll make sure I'll cut this section of the video, Dan.
Okay, I think we're going to bring it down, and I want to thank everyone. I thought this might have been the best webinar I've been on ever, perhaps. I like the topic. The presenters did a phenomenal job of showing your materials and your opinions. I'm fascinated by the survey. I'll be following up with you, Vartane. And again, for all the folks in the audience, my sincerest thanks for your attendance. I think we've got something good here. Try and pay attention on LinkedIn for the next webinar that we're going to sponsor at CPM. Not sure it'll be quite as interesting and new and dynamic as this, but this was great stuff. And on behalf of CPM, thank you all very much, especially Dave and Vartane and Daryl for your administrative assistance. I wish you all a wonderful afternoon, evening, depending on your time zone. And we look forward to seeing you again. Thanks again for the survey. It's back in there in the link if you want to click it real quick before you leave the meeting. I wish you all the best, and we'll see you next time.